what I'm about to say is my truth, and that is that a lack of discipline is not the cause of out of control children and teenagers running around wild on the streets. It's actually too much discipline and not enough love. My name is Leisa Coleman. I'm a mother of 4. I've been unschooling my children for more than 13 years. I'm also an early childhood educator. I run my own family daycare business. I have been in the business of studying children. And what I mean by that is, how better can we learn other than experimentation and studying what does and does not work with our own children? And I've had the opportunity to do this with other children in the field of childcare as well. Now, what I am going to share about this is based on my own experiences as a kid growing up and being raised in a particular environment and then parenting my own children differently. So how do I know that children are not out there on the streets committing crimes, using drugs, and just out of control? Because there's not enough discipline. That's because I was, as I said, I was raised one way and I parented another. So I've gotten to see how both paths can play out and create who we become in the world. The reason I'm sharing this video is because it has come to my attention a lot recently. I work in a public bar, so I'm always hearing people talk about the news and what they're hearing on social media. And although I don't follow the news and I don't follow stories and drama on social media, I do hear a lot working in a bar. And what I have heard a lot lately is people talk about what's going on out there in the world, on the streets, and all the crime and children being out of control. And they're saying that it's a lack of discipline from the parents. And they're quite upset that parents are not supposed to be smacking their kids, because they obviously have the belief that to bring these kids back into line and to make them do the right thing, they need more discipline, they need smacking, they need more control. I'm going to tell you that I do not believe that that is true. In fact, the opposite is true. Children who are raised with too much discipline and too much control and not enough love and compassion, they are going to misbehave. They're going to act out that frustration in unhealthy ways. And I did this myself as a 15-year-old teenager who left home, and I went wild on the streets. So when I say a lack of love, I'm not talking about parents just don't love their kids, because we all love our kids. I'm talking about a lack of compassion. So what children need to thrive and be well balanced and well behaved is they need acceptance and they need kindness. They need to be respected for their boundaries. They need that true unconditional love. And now we may all not know what that is, because we weren't raised with that ourselves. So how can we know how to unconditionally love our children if we were not taught that and shown that by our own parents? So I do also often hear people say, I was raised that way by my parents. My parents smacked me and look how I turned out. I have respect for people, but that is unhealthy respect. That is not a respect that's born from your true honoring and your true acceptance of your true nature and your boundaries and your sense of self. That is something that was conditioned into you. And urge you to ask yourself, if you were raised this way, do you know what true inner authority and inner respect and inner self-love is? And there's a good chance that you may not know that answer. So I'm talking a lot here because I'm super excited about this topic. So what I mean by true unconditional love, and we may not all, even myself included, be able to fully pull this off as human beings in a physical body, because unconditional love belongs to the realm of universal love and divine love and energy. But we can embody this as much as possible in our earthly bodies and life. To do this, we need to be in touch with our own true nature, our own self-love, our own inner authority. And this has not happened for us growing up as children, because we were also heavily controlled and we weren't heard and met and understood for our own emotions. So if you are worried that your child is going to end up out there on the streets running amok and causing trouble and not listening at home and doing whatever they want and backchatting and running away and just doing the wrong thing, the quickest way to prevent this is to learn about how you can love your child as deeply and as much in alignment with that universal love as possible. Now, what this looks like, this doesn't just look like loving your kid and kissing them goodnight when they go to bed and reading them a book. This actually means that you accept their emotions. So the biggest cause of a lack of love in childhood is not being allowed to feel. So when children are not allowed to be frustrated or angry or sad or upset or throw tantrums, when they are back chatting, to them, they are standing up for themselves. They are expressing who they are. This is normal and healthy. And this is what we all should be teaching our children to do. Have healthy boundaries and self-respect. What are we doing instead? We are condemning them. We are punishing them. We are saying you are not allowed to speak up. You are a small child. You do not get to stand up for yourself. You do not get to give your honest answer and opinion. You need to be quiet and do as you are told. This is harmful to a child because this is this is causing them to suppress their true nature. And when they are not allowed to express who they are and have feelings and voice their opinions, it builds up, okay? It builds up and builds up. And by the time they are teenagers, they can't take it anymore. It is so bottled up, it starts to seep out in ways that they're not even aware of. They have buried their true feelings so deeply that all they have learnt to do is create a fake self in that place, a fake self that's going to please their parents and please other people so that they don't get into trouble. So this is not a healthy sense of self. And so what happens is this builds up and this builds up, and children, particularly because most children on this planet are generated children. If you are into human design, you will know that generated children have a constant need to expend energy and to do things and to constantly be working on projects and burning energy and just play. They are being forced to sit in a classroom for one. They are also being told they can't run around, they have to be still. So they're also being told when to go to bed, when to sleep, when to eat. They're constantly, generators need to follow their inner authority and listen to what they're being called to do moment to moment. But instead, they're being told what to do by their parents all day long. And this is why we see children so defiant and acting up and rebellious because this doesn't feel true to them. What they're being told to do doesn't align with their inner truth. I feel like it's a bit dark in here. It's really not that dark well, maybe it is actually. So this frustration of being controlled every day, all day, and not being allowed to direct their own day, it builds up and it builds up, and eventually children they need an outlet. So they'll go out there and and this doesn't always happen. You can't guarantee that a child that's raised with a lot of control and rules and a lack of compassion for their emotions is going to go out there and run wild. It could be the opposite. They could have developed a quiet sense of self that hides in a corner and is too scared to do the wrong thing. That's the other end of that spectrum. So, but often children that grow up and teenagers that are out there and they're causing trouble, or they're out there drinking alcohol at a young age, using drugs, or, they're young adults and rather than get a good job and settle down, they're out there drinking at the pub every night and they're drinking until they're passing out every weekend. Like, these are people that have grown up, they haven't known who they really are and what they really want, because that has been, and there's no other way to say it, but bluntly, it's been squished down in them. So this frustration of not being able to be who we are as children, it builds up and it builds up and it comes out in unhealthy ways. How do I know this? Because I was one of those teenagers. When I was 15, I packed a garbage bag full of clothes and I left home. I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to live. I slept from house to house, friends to friends. I ended up living with drug dealers, using drugs, and I had already been doing all of this at school, mind you. And I love my mother. I'm very close with my mother now, but we did not get along. And that was mostly because I had ideas, I had passions, I had things I wanted to do, and I was being heavily controlled at home. I also had parents who had not healed their own childhood traumas, and that was being projected onto me. So all of this meant that I wasn't really met with compassion for my emotions and feelings. How could I be if my parents weren't taught that growing up? So I have compassion for them, that was not really their fault. But what was there left for me to do as a 15-year-old girl who had not been allowed to be myself, have feelings, express emotions, be who I wanted to be? I was also brought up prior to that by an abusive father who every time I opened my mouth, I was told to be quiet, and I was literally not allowed to speak or have an opinion. And so I grew up quite, in an abusive environment and a restrictive environment, a lot of control, a lot of being in trouble for speaking my truth. So I had had enough by the age of 15, and I went out there and I went wild on the streets. I egged houses. I stole wheelie bins. I did all those things that kids are out. I probably would have stolen a car. Yes, I was bad. I wasn't a bad person, because these kids out there, they're not bad inside. They just need love. Okay. So I know this because I ended up running with the wrong people, did the wrong thing. I got involved with the police, and I did this for years, and I grew out of it, of course. But that lack of love, that desire to be met and seen for who I really am, and to have somebody be in the presence of my deepest feelings, that longing was always there. And so I didn't realize this until years later when I went to therapy. And therapy is the best thing if you want to heal all of that childhood trauma. Therapy is magic. And it wasn't until I had my therapy sessions that I realized that the ways that I behaved and acted wasn't because I didn't have enough control or discipline, or I wasn't smacked enough. It was because I was smacked too much. It was because I was controlled too much. And I was not allowed to be who I was. I was not allowed to have healthy boundaries, healthy expression, healthy inner authority, healthy opinions. And I wasn't seen. I was made to be somebody else. And who I really was good and was acceptable and was lovable and was worthy. And when I started to embody this and realize this, I forgave my teenage self. I forgave myself for doing what I just only knew at the time. And so that's the story of me and how I was one of those teenagers that I hear people condemn and talk about and say should have been smacked more. Well, no, these people are hurting because they were smacked. They're hurting because they didn't get that love and compassion that they desired. They didn't get the freedom of choice that they desired. And so I want to share how parenting my children the complete opposite way prevented any of that, prevented any of this teenage rebellion. So I have 4 children, youngest being 12, the eldest 23. And now for some time, I probably smacked once or twice my kids, but I didn't want to raise my kids the way I was raised. And this is the first step to breaking generational trauma and to being a different parent. It's not being perfect and not being nothing like your parents. It's having the desire to be different. It's having the desire to change and to make better changes and choices than what your parents made. And so I raised my kids how I thought they needed to be raised for some time, for a few years. And it wasn't until I discovered homeschooling and things started to change within me. So all of my childhood upbringing was leading me to a spiritual awakening that I was supposed to have probably in my early 30s. I started to realize that I didn't want my kids to go to school. Things that I was doing wasn't working. And now because I hadn't gone to therapy yet, I didn't know that how I was raised was wrong. I knew to some extent. I didn't want to smack my kids. I didn't want to yell at them for having a voice. But I wasn't quite there yet. So I was still raising them with strict rules and I was sending them to school and I thought I knew what I was doing. And it wasn't until I'd started homeschooling and then later unschooling that I started to realize that all the rules and structure and control and everything just hadn't been working all that time. And so I just completely decided to stop. I decided to go all in and I removed all rules and all control and all discipline. I literally let my kids go wild in the home. Now, they didn't go wild. Something amazing and magical happened. It was the opposite to what people are talking about out there that happens when kids are left to do what they want and there's no discipline and no punishment. I started to see who they really were. There was such a calm and a joy and a settledness in them. They weren't being told what to do anymore. And so they started to behave better. They stopped fighting. And kids always fight, all kids fight, but they learned, I just backed away and I was there to prevent, accidents. I kept my kids safe, but I stopped telling them what to do. I stopped getting mad at them for having feelings. I let them throw tantrums even in the middle of the grocery store. And I know because I go shopping and I hear people talk about kids these days and, if they're throwing a tantrum, they need a smack or something. No, that wasn't me. I let them have their feelings. I let them feel everything. And at first, all of their feelings came out because to some extent I was restricting their feelings. And so all their feelings started to come out and just something amazing happened. So years later, I can say now that I never experienced teenage angst, and I never experienced teenage rebellion. I let my teenagers, get angry at me, and I would ask myself, do I deserve this? Like, have I overstepped a boundary? And a lot of times, yes, I had. So they were just sticking up for themselves, and I appreciated that. I let them have their inner authority. I let them guide their own day and their own life, make decisions based on who they were. And having this freedom and being met for their feelings, and, they would throw a tantrum and cry, and I would hold them and cuddle them. Or I would just let them be. And I did this, literally, it's been over 13 years since I had any rules or control over my children. And I have not experienced any of this. I have a 23-year-old that moved out of home, and he's in a relationship. He barely drinks. He doesn't use drugs. He has a great job. We're very close. He's a very good citizen in the community, does the right thing. He's well respected. I have a almost 20-year-old who's still living at home, and there's no signs of any of that. I have a quite rebellious 15-year-old who has been allowed to rebel within the home and within the family and be into death metal and dress goth and just be whoever he wants to be and do that in a safe environment. And there's no sign of we all get along so wonderful. No sign of wanting to run away and use drugs or anything or steal cars. And my 12-year-old is on his way on the same path. So none of that ever happened for me. And I did not discipline or punish my kids. So I just want to show that you can go one way and a child's life can turn out completely different, and you can go a different way. And the only way for you to know is to experiment. So I urge you, don't listen to what's out there. Don't listen to people telling you need to discipline your kids more and that you need to pull them in line more. No, try something new. Try it this way and see what happens for yourself. You might be pleasantly surprised. Wishing you all a wonderful day. Sending love.